If I could go back in time, right, and meet myself when I was 20 or something and give myself advice, what would I say?
What if
What would
that
it be?
is deja vu?
Ooh,
It's your other mind trying to crack through.
slowly craft ourselves into better people. It's sort of like a Groundhog Day kind of thing.
Probably have invented time travel at some point, but whoever went back changed something enough to the point where they never ended up inventing time travel. And so they got stuck like Quantum Leap or something.
Every experience, whether it be something that you feel bad about or good about, it's something that educates you. You
Yeah.
learn and grow from it. Okay, welcome to another kitchen sink microscopy. I'm Eric Rosenblatt, and that's Floyd over there. Oh, look at that. We would love it if you would like and share this video. Floyd especially, he loves likes. Um, like and share this video, subscribe to the channel and all that good stuff. That's what cool cats do. You want to be a cool cat, don't you?
And if you're a fan of Floyd, you can head over to ksmvidcast.com and get a Floyd t-shirt. And you can also check out our music there. There's links to Spotify and iTunes and all the other great places where you can find Altair music.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
what are we talking about tonight, good sir?
Well, I was thinking, you being a biologist, oh, well, apparently that is a really interesting microphone. Okay. Well, so you being a biologist, I kind of want to get your take on something. Um, let's talk about the ethics and morality of human cloning.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's a real interesting one because it's not what people think like when they see a sci-fi movie and
Yeah.
like some adult pops out of a husk or something.
Yeah. People think they come out fully grown. Like, nah, that's not how cloning works.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, at least not given our current state of technology. Like, you can't make it's not like copy and paste, basically,
Yeah.
with people.
Yeah. So it really is super interesting and fascinating because um, here's the thing. No matter what you do, if you were to clone yourself, I mean, for all intents and purposes, you'd be the same person or whatever, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
on a carbon copy sort of level, like mostly the same, right?
Yeah.
Except there's this thing called epigenetics where your environment and your choices in life, like what you expose yourself to, things like that.
Oh, even your diet.
Yeah, how much
You know?
radiation you take in just from the sun or devices or X-rays or whatever it is, all that stuff uh, methylates and you get like these histamine things going on, and you get basically like these top level changes to DNA,
Hmm.
and that's all experiential. Now that stuff can be passed on, but it kind of skips a generation because of it, just kind of the way that I mean that we're getting way into the weeds in biology and gametes and reproduction and stuff. But
It's
anyway,
okay. I find gametes sexy, so that's fine.
if if you want to like read up on epigenetics, it's actually really interesting. I have a book. I don't recall the exact name of it right now. Epigenetic Revolution or something like that. But it's a really pretty easy read actually.
Hmm.
And it's super interesting. I might reread it. I haven't brushed up on that in a while.
Yeah. Well, and if you remember to tell me while I'm editing the episode, or maybe just put a link down in the description or something
Yeah,
when it's published. Um, yeah, I actually think it's really interesting. It, and there's a lot to it. I know there's like people who feel very strongly about it, like from like a personal morality standpoint. That's kind of what I wanted to get into.
yeah.
It
Um,
like the, but I think a lot of the people who feel strongly from a moral standpoint are the kind of people who would be likely to think that you just pop out of some kind of pod, fully grown, as a clone of somebody, you know.
yeah, and so I I, I kind of wonder if some of the ethics behind it has to do with like maybe they think it's incapable of having a soul if it's just a copy of you, or
Oh, I actually I have a story about that, a brief one. But go ahead. I'll
oh,
come back to
well,
that.
I was just gonna say like you know, even beyond the epigenetics thing, you know, we did that whole episode on the connectome. You know, like
Yeah,
your neural uh, connections and stuff like that, pretty much all experiential. Like from the time you're born, you're creating pathways based on your experiences and your environment, and you know, even to some degree what the chemicals that you ingest, you know, whether for fun
yeah.
or whatever, you know, that can all have a complete uh, you know, bifurcation in you know, a clone, in the colloquial term that we understand it as. A clone just kind of becomes its own person, you know.
Yeah, like it changes what you ultimately become.
Yeah,
Like the your genetics are basically the seed from which you grow, but if you plant a tree in Africa or you plant a tree in South America, they're going to be completely different because of their environment and the nutrients they're taking up and stuff.
yeah,
Or they might
it's
just
basically
die.
it's basically no different than twins, except you're massively different ages.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny that people generally don't have a problem with twins. They actually think it's kind of novel and interesting. But then when you talk about cloning people, all of a sudden everybody gets a little bit skeevy or something like that. I
Yeah,
I don't know. My only ethical issue with human cloning is that it kind of undermines natural selection. It's kind of like royalty back in the day. They used to interbreed and stuff, and all kinds of weird stuff would happen because you didn't have enough diversity of genetics, and that's a good thing. Um, so I kind of have a problem with that, and I guess it's kind of also I think like, what's the point? Why clone somebody? It's kind of making an assumption that a genetic line is superior to another and it deserves to be copied and exist. Like, no, I would prefer that nature just kind of shows us that, I guess.
yeah. I mean, so that's kind of like the GMO argument, right? So it to say it's not natural, or it avoids natural selection, I don't necessarily agree with that. It's kind of like just a different tool to achieve the same things we're already doing. We already make selections, you know, genetic selections and stuff like that. And where this differs from like having sex with your sister or something is that
Oh
your
yeah, giggity.
your DNA is already like um, made in a heterogeneous way. Copying it isn't going to give you the same problems as uh, combining two gametes from very close lineage. There's
It's a
so
good point.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you might run into the banana issue if you like whittled it down to like the smallest possible degree, but
Yeah, like if there's too many clones and some weird thing comes into the system, like I don't know, a virus or something like that, then it could just completely wipe everybody out.
yeah. Now I mean, if it's like freely available to people for like a decent cost, I don't see any kind of eugenics coming out of it. If it were something like you had to be selected, carefully chosen to be able to use cloning, it's more of like a privileged status sort of thing where you can fall into eugenics real easy.
Well, yeah, and that kind of to some extent parallels like Gattaca. Um, Recommended viewing, by the way, great movie. Yeah, the privileges and your genetics determines your position in society and things like that. That is a huge problem, and who can do it, that sort of thing.
Yeah, but here's where I see the point in doing it, and it's not even necessarily like thinking that you have superior genetics, because that's certainly not the case in my situation. You don't get cancer twice and think, oh, I better pass on my genetic line. But, well, maybe some people do. But I'm just saying, if I wanted to have a kid, and I felt like I really wanted to have a biological connection, cloning would be actually my only option at this point.
That's a really good point. Yeah, there's a lot of people that can't have kids,
Yeah.
and they have to go down all sorts of weird paths to do that.
Yeah.
Now, adoption being one of those, like I think adoption is great. Like personally, I don't think people should care that much about like bloodlines and genetic shit. Like just because it doesn't matter, Like you are adopted,
probably cheaper than cloning, actually.
Well, now, yeah. But you're adopted and you're every bit the effective son of your adopted parents. Like, they raised you. They were there for you. All of your experiences are there. So
by the way, today is my dad's 70th birthday, so shout out.
Oh man. Wow, happy birthday. Dang, that's crazy. Man.
But yeah, anyway, I mean, like the ethical line I draw kind of comes from that, where it's like, yeah, there are people that you can adopt, and there's a lot of people in the world already. So it's like, do you really need to be copying yourself, bro?
Yeah, like I could see it being something that could be useful. Maybe I just don't know what the point is, honestly. Like,
yeah, I mean, if it were like a Gollum situation where you could transfer your consciousness into a fresh, younger, new body or whatever, I could see a point in wanting to have, your body effectively, right?
Yeah. So okay, let's say you turn 20 or 30 or something like that, and you clone yourself so that you could have a copy of yourself that you could like inject your mind into at a later date, and you could be young again. But then
40.
Yeah, but that does also bring up like some ethical dilemmas as well. Like, what about the mind of the person you've taken over? What is it in DS9? The trills, I think. Yeah, that kind of thing. Like, though in that series they said like you kind of combine.
Yeah, you blend.
Yeah, but if you just wipe out somebody's mind and replace it with your own, like
how cool would that be if you could clone yourself at 20, and then when you're about 40 or whatever, you inject your mind into your 20-year-old clone body, right? But you get to blend with the unique experiences that your beta 20-year-old self has had.
Ooh.
And have those memories and stuff. Like,
oh man, that would be so cool, because I often think like
that's immortality effectively, right?
Totally. Yeah. and I often think like, if I knew then the things that I know now, the experiences I've had, like I would have had a completely different path in life.
Oh yeah.
And because I think like, what would I go back if I could go back in time, right? And meet myself when I was 20 or something and give myself advice, what would I say?
Right.
And
about that too. Yeah.
Yeah. And the first thing I'd say is buy a sailboat. But like what would you like if you could do that? Like go back in time and give yourself advice.
What if
What would
that
it be?
is deja vu?
Ooh.
It's your other mind trying to crack through.
Oh, dang, man, this is some fourth dimensional shit right there. Man.
um,
Whoa, this nicotine is we got to go to THC now at this point.
well, if I got to go back and tell my 20-year-old self or blend with my 20-year-old self or whatever and have another like 18, 19 years of experience, um, I I think it would mostly have to do with um, like thinking way ahead.
Yeah,
Start retirement savings early. Don't settle for part-time jobs. Like get into the full-time job gig, because
yeah.
however much you make per hour isn't really nearly as important as getting up to that 40-hour mark.
You're totally right there.
Yeah.
But I would hope that your advice wouldn't somehow shift your younger self away from Altair and all the 2003 experiences and stuff like that.
I mean, that's the thing of it though, right? Like if you were to go back in time, even something as simple as, telling myself, oh, you need to work an extra 10, 20 hours a week or whatever. That I could have had such an impact that, I would have made some very different decisions.
Yeah, and it's actually really interesting. Like, what if we could do that continuously?
Yeah.
How we would slowly craft ourselves into better people. It's sort of like a Groundhog Day kind of thing,
I have
in a
often
sense.
wished I could do that actually.
Yeah,
Like I don't really want to change the course of how I got to where I am now, because I don't really believe in having regrets, because everything that happened to you got you where you are now. And as long as you don't feel like killing yourself, you're in a good spot, right?
yeah, and every experience, whether it be something that you feel bad about or good about, it's something that educates you. You
Yeah.
learn and grow from it.
Yeah. But,
And
but to take my experiences and start over again, like that's something I think about a lot. Shower thoughts, like
yeah, yeah.
how cool would it be to like know what I know now and just be 17 again,
Oh man. Oh, I think about that too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I don't call that a regret. It's more of a fantasy. Like,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I don't regret anything. Like, sure, mistakes, whatever. But those are, I mean, if I didn't make mistakes, I wouldn't have the kind of sense about the universe that I have now. I'd actually be kind of dumb, honestly. Like, so I think those things were valuable. Um, but yeah, and then like, what if you could go back in time and you give yourself advice, but then causality, right? Like you make different decisions and you never end up deciding the things that make you who you were back when you gave yourself advice. So you never go back in time and give yourself advice because everything worked out. Like, but it's supposed to be talking about cloning here. So, but I think these things are kind of connected. Um,
we probably have invented time travel at some point, but whoever went back changed something enough to the point where they never ended up inventing time travel. And so they got stuck like Quantum Leap or something.
yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Like, it depends on how you see space time and all that. Like all the threads connected, like causality. If you can change something in the past and it affects the future, or if it becomes like some kind of deviant timeline that exists all on its own.
Yeah.
But
Well,
even then, if it does,
that
then
timeline, yeah, if that timeline continues on, the machine that you built will still be sitting there, but you'll never ever come back to that time.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
so there could be abandoned time machines somewhere, probably in Tesla's old apartment.
Probably so. Yeah.
And all we need to
Yeah.
do is stumble on them. Oh, this is a good book idea, isn't
Oh man. Oh damn. Yes, I like that.
it?
Yeah. Oh my god. Wow. Oh. Well,
We went from cloning to time travel.
that's a worthy deviation. I think we yeah
I
we've
mean,
got some.
it is kind of an attempt at time travel, though, isn't it? It's like,
Well, it kind of yeah, in a sense. I mean, especially when you add like the put your mind into your clone's body kind of thing. Like, yeah, it is a little bit like time travel.
oh,
Um,
oh, yeah. Oh, this would be interesting. So, say I wanted kids, but I'm sterile from the cancer, right? So
Mhm.
I clone myself up, and then when um, you know 20-year-old me or whatever is like, hey, you have any advice? I'd be like, go knock someone up while you can, and it's like I want a grandkid that also happens to be my son technically. And even though I'm sterile, I now have a grandchild and never had a son myself.
Oh my God, that's the antithesis of the advice I would give myself. But yeah, no, that's a good point. Like, wow. Oh my God. So maybe we could, like, getting back into cloning again, because you brought up the whole soul thing. Um, I want to bring that up. I had a coworker. I worked at this industrial robotics company, and we had to go from a long drive from California to Nevada one time. And somehow we got on we were talking about random stuff, and we got on the topic of cloning. And so this guy is like a Christian. And he was insistent that if you cloned yourself or a person, right, that person would not have a soul because they were artificially created or something. And I'm like, what? The processes are kind of similar, and whatever God uses to connect a soul to a person would still apply, whether they're made in like a uterus or in a lab. Like, I don't see why it would suddenly be different.
Do you think
Um,
that about test tube babies? The in vitro fertilization.
yeah,
Wow,
exactly.
that's crazy because I mean, you can't tell just by looking at someone. You could be jabbering on about how somebody born IVF has no soul, and you could be like saying that directly to them and not know it.
Yeah.
A buddy of mine, his daughter was that way, and I went over to his apartment, and there was this picture on the wall, and I was like, "Is that a blastocyst?" And he was like, "Yeah, that's her." And I was like, "Holy shit!"
Wow. Huh.
Yeah, you can't do that in a normal pregnancy. You can't get a picture of a blastocyst because
No.
you don't. There's no possible way you would even know you're pregnant like 2 days after you got inseminated. You know.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, wow. That's crazy. Well, for the viewing audience, you should probably explain what that is so
Oh, it's
they
like
know.
it's so early on in the division of the sperm and egg. Like basically, I forget all the levels it goes through, right? But this is so early; it's before you even call it an embryo. It's like 10 cells or something. That's a blastocyst,
Wow.
and that, interestingly enough, is where you get pluripotent stem cells from, like the ones that can turn into anything, right? Because you're only 10 cells, right? So it's all
Yeah.
got to be pluripotent. It can turn into anything. And
Hmm.
so that's why you can't just take fertilize or, fertilized eggs or something from a petri dish or something, like, and um, that's been like sitting in a freezer or whatever. People are like, why can't you just recycle what's already, you know, frozen somewhere? And it's like, well, it's already surpassed that stage, and I don't know. It's so cool that something from just 10 cells can do so much.
Yeah. Oh man, I agree. Like I think the entire process is pretty amazing, actually, like how it all works. And man, that's his whole own episode, actually, to go into. God, I got like cat hair.
That would actually be I can't believe we haven't talked about like stem cell ethics yet.
Yeah.
Okay, we're writing that down.
Yeah, write it down. We're not going to do it right now.
Man, I
Yeah.
won't shut up if we do
Oh man.
You had to go and pick a biology topic.
Yeah, well, I figured, why not? I mean, we gotta balance things out here. Hmm. Yeah, man. So, so I guess since we're talking about cloning, like we can't go very far without going into red dwarf territory. Um, and there's two episodes that I'm thinking of, but the first one is Rimmer World.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And, yeah, he like makes this clone and it was in a big furry husk. And he thought he was cloning a woman version of himself or whatever. But it was like him.
Yeah. Yeah. And there were even like feminine versions of him, but they were just him
They just
wearing
rolls and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that again like shows that kind of thing, because they were like, what was the narrative, like after 10 days the cocoon cracked and then like it's Rimmer like coming out of there like ha. And yeah, that kind of feeds into that whole thing. People think clones are fully grown.
Yeah. That actually, the red dwarf angle just gave me a really good idea for why cloning would actually be a pretty optimal technology to take advantage of. And that's for if we want to travel to other planets and populate them, the quickest, easiest, best way to do that is just send, like 30 people over, which is enough to create a diverse gene pool, and have them clone themselves a few times. And then, because you can clone yourself more than once, right? So
Sure. Yeah.
that would be a pretty not quick, right? Because they have to grow.
Exactly.
Speed, right? So but what I'm saying is, like, you don't have to take the time to wait for the right ovulation window and then hope the sperm takes and all that stuff. Like, it's like, hey, we're just going to clone you. Boom, there it is.
Yeah. And like, I'm thinking about like there was years ago there was a news article about like what was it, a sheep or something that was cloned.
Golly.
Yeah, and everybody freaked out like it was the end of the world. And I'm just thinking, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
Like, what is the problem here? And I think the problem, where people take issue, stems from ignorance, like not understanding what it is and how it works and things like that. That they have this kind of cinematic view of how things work, the fly or something like that. Like, they think things work a certain way, but they actually don't work that way at all. And that's where their misgivings come from. Maybe I don't know. I don't know why people have a problem with it. Like, yeah, I guess there could be problems, but not the things that people think. Yeah.
I can't remember exactly like a lot of cloning experiments that they wouldn't have viable, um I hate to say products because they're living beings or whatever,
Yeah.
but a viable product wouldn't come from it. Like Dolly, I think, lasted a while, but like other attempts were like maybe a few days, and they had some crazy unexpected genetic mutations or something. I don't know if that was just like a method that just needs to be perfected a little bit, or if it kind of builds off that epigenetic situation I talked about at the head of the show, where like, yeah, the DNA that made you what you are now can be copied as is, but it may not necessarily be suited for starting from scratch in a fresh body or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's making sense, but
Yeah, it makes sense to me, but yeah. So something just popped into my head. Thinking about like cloning, right? So if let's say using our current technology, you clone yourself. Um, you have essentially very close to the same DNA, right? As like the clone would be almost indistinguishable from you. Like if you just looked at the DNA, I think, right? Am I correct in that?
I mean, yeah, like,
So let's say that you did that whole thing where you cloned yourself when you were 20 and you put your brain in there or whatever, and there were multiple copies of you. Like one of the issues I could see would be DNA testing. What if one of these clones commits a crime, right? Like rapes somebody, or well, we can't say that on YouTube without getting demonetized. Shit.
bleep it out.
Oh, okay. Once. But you know, you do something bad and your DNA is analyzed. Could that analysis lead to the wrong person being convicted of a crime that they didn't commit? You know, what if the crime was so heinous that it, you know, brought on the death penalty or something like that?
Yeah. Uh, I I have never run a comparative DNA panel personally, so I couldn't tell you like what the margin of error is and all that stuff. I do know that there are mitochondrial markers that they like to look at, you know, stuff that carries over in that gamete process, you know, from your mother, and that of course would be pretty indiscernible from one another. But that's also the case with like brothers or something, you know. So I
True.
mean, this sort of thing already does happen where there's like enough to say that you're related, but not necessarily enough to say that it's one person or the other in that lineage.
Yeah, and I guess that's where like I would take issue with DNA testing as being kind of the end all be all of uh, the justice system. Like, okay, well
Well,
that's a
don't get me
tool
wrong,
in your toolbox, right?
odds are like pretty small that you're wrong when you've got enough markers. But
Except when you have a bunch of clones running around wreaking havoc. You know, we don't have that today. So of course, what you're saying holds true right now. But if everybody's cloning themselves, I could see some issues stemming from that, and maybe we develop different methods after that. Because
yeah, I mean, I right off the bat, I can tell you we've already got the technology to do this. You could, because that's a good point. You know, that's something you got to think about in the future. It's like, you know, putting serial numbers on bullets or something. But you could use a technology called CRISPR to basically go in and add to that mitochondrial DNA a little unique identifier code that separates you from your clone.
yeah,
You know, genetically.
so it's
And
kind of like having a barcode on your forehead, but
right,
with
but
the
here's
DNA.
the thing that involves regulation.
Mm-hmm.
However you feel about that.
Yeah, man, wow, that
On one hand, you have surefire justice. On the other hand, you have tracking.
yeah. Well, there's probably somewhere in the middle too, as an option. Um, but you know, we aren't quite there yet. We don't have people cloning themselves yet.
If you hand one of them a guitar, though, and he just plays it like a diva, that's
Oh man.
an issue.
Mhm. So I was thinking, oh man, so much beer. Yeah, I've only had one. Just saying. You know, like going back into Red Dwarf, like I think about that episode called DNA, where they encountered that ship that there was some kind of weird genetic modification machine, and everybody was all like twisted and weird and
Yeah.
screwed up, and then they started using it themselves. Like, um, I, you know, changing. I guess the idea was that the dead people like started tweaking their genetics to make improvements, and things went haywire, right? Like they took it too far or something like that. Um, but let's say a machine like that existed where you could like adjust your genetics. Would you do it?
Hell yeah. No, I mean, that CRISPR technology I told you about pretty much does that. It's
Yeah.
not like a fancy beam that traps you and turns you into a chicken, but
With a cool echoey voice and lights and buttons and stuff. No,
yeah,
I'm familiar with CRISPR. I think it's a pretty cool thing. Like there's a lot of potential there.
yeah,
Um, yeah,
yeah.
and
That's
maybe we should, like, especially if we, my thought is if we ever want to become like a proper spacefaring species, right? Like get out into space and do stuff, we have to fix some problems. We have some issues as humans. Um, and maybe through genetic modification, we can do that. Um, as long as it doesn't become like some kind of tug of war where we're like trying to one up each other and have bigger, poutier lips or something like that. And then all of a sudden we've got tentacles coming out of our heads. Um,
I
because I
mean,
could see that happening.
I wouldn't have a problem with cosmetic use. Um, as long as the people know that you might be changing shit you don't think you're changing. You know,
Yeah, because there's interconnections there that like
yeah.
you pull one thing, you push another. Um, and
The
then
weird product.
what you brought up before about like the haves and the have-nots, like who has access to this? If it, in my mind, if it's an open source kind of thing, you could 3D print it, you could develop it on something akin to an Arduino, do it at home. I'm fine with that. But if it's something that's like highly regulated that only a select few have access to, then of course those select few are going to be the perfect people, and all of us are going to be the fuckers who have to live down on the planet while everybody lives on Elysium or whatever. Um, so, the control is the issue there. Um, I don't think it's going to go the way like the Red Dwarf episode of DNA, where we're going to like extinguish ourselves trying to be like better and hotter, that kind of thing. I think there will actually be like decent improvements, and maybe we'll unlock potentials we never realized that human beings could have. um, I
This,
think that the key is to first get over all of our physical hangups, like our physiology, like skin color and bullshit like that. And once we can overcome that, we'll be more interested in like uh, real changes that really matter, rather than things to put us into a different class. I guess I don't know.
everyone will be making themselves into a double Polaroid.
Another Red Dwarf reference. If you don't know that one, you should probably see that. What episode was that?
The same one.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, he became human. Yeah. Okay, that's right. Yeah.
Ewan didn't know what a penis was, and so he took a picture of it. And then he looks at a washer and dryer catalog and he gets a double Polaroid. That reminds me of that story I have to tell you about last week. I had a double Polaroid picture for that.
Oh God, yeah.
Ugh.
Priapism, man. Wow, that is some people think that's they're like, oh hell yeah, but it's like, nah. When you have to suffer through that,
That shit hurts.
it's yeah, it's not good.
Especially when you have to get stabbed in the dick with 2 needles.
Oh Jesus. Yeah, let's well, I think we've been thoroughly demonetized right now. Um yeah, Jesus.
Anyway,
Oh man.
what were we talking about before my penis?
Um I don't remember. Uh Cloning. Yeah, that's it. So, yeah, I don't know. Do you think like if we had total control of our genetics, let's say we like figure everything out and we have the tools to modify things and change things, do you think Earth would end up like that DNA episode where we just like completely destroy ourselves in an ever increasing leapfrog of trying to one up each other, or is it going to be some kind of thing where we actually like make some headway?
I, I'd like to think it would actually go pretty positively, but I mean that's being simplistic about it, right? That's thinking, oh, people will have the best intentions and you'll have the best results. But here's the problem with playing with genetics, um, and this isn't specifically cloning. This is more like the genetic modification angle. But when you change something, it can have branch of effects, you
Yeah.
know, and those probably are nowhere near guaranteed to be in your favor. You know,
Hmm.
when you're playing with mutations more often than not, like way more often than not, they're not good. And I mean, like sometimes they're neutral, but sometimes they're very bad. But
Yeah.
very seldom do they actually help you or whatever, you know. So
Yeah, and that's kind of like based on what we currently know. I'm thinking like let's assume we know exactly what all of the effects are going to be. Um, yeah, I lean in that direction. I think people probably will do good. I would hope that we would extinguish a bunch of bullshit diseases and random stuff like cancer, um, using that. Maybe of course, everybody's going to have to be like super buff. They're going to all have to be Schwarzeneggers to fit into society. I mean, that is a problem I see that like, if you can achieve perfection, at least what we perceive as perfection, then it becomes like a race to be that, and then be better than that and stronger than that and faster. Like maybe that could actually bring us to a good place, and maybe it'll illustrate like how stupid all that is. Who knows? Like at some point, maybe we'll go like the wabi sabi direction where like imperfection is actually beautiful. Um,
well, I mean,
maybe.
like what is it that makes, you know, objective beauty, uh because that, those things tend to change over time, right?
True.
You look at Renaissance paintings, uh body styles for both men and women. um it, Actually, the interesting thing you'll notice, women may have been a little more on the chubby side in those paintings, but oftentimes the dudes were still like super ripped for some reason, right?
Yeah.
So like this whole like male body style has been actually kind of the longer running stereotype.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, that like skinny girl kind of thing is actually fairly recent.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, well, and going into that, like, what is beauty, right? Like that, I think is actually probably one of the most deep human questions, right? Like, it's kind of akin to asking the question, like, why is a sunset beautiful or something? Like, how can you explain that? Like, it just is. I think even Star Trek TNG talked about that. Like that episode with Data and Geordi talking about anger or something like that. Um, yeah,
yeah, you just know. Yeah,
yeah, that's true. Oof,
I've
man.
I've I've had a girlfriend or two in the past that occasionally would feel a little insecure or something and say, "Why do you love me?" And that's like the worst fucking question you can ask someone, right?
Yeah.
Like how the hell are you supposed to like put this to words, right?
Well, again, it's like, why is a sunset beautiful?
Yeah.
How long is a piece of string? These are unquantifiable things. It's a personal thing. It's something that like only you can know. And I think that's important for everybody to see that. Like, you know, I, okay, maybe we're going into PSA directions, but everybody, don't worry about how you look, whether you're like chubby or muscular or athletic or whatever. Like it doesn't matter. What actually matters is what's in your head, like your accomplishments as a person. And in fact, through history, some of the most accomplished people are some of the most physically, I guess, what would be perceived as being kind of like lower people. Look at um, Stephen Hawking, right? Dude is in a wheelchair. He can't even actually talk. He uses a computer to talk. And he's one of the most like celebrated physicists. Like the dude is a freaking genius. And
What?
well, okay, was. Well, he is, because he lives on in my heart. But
How is Stephen Hawking talking?
I knew that was going to come up. Oh man. I mean, I think it's really important for people to understand, like the things you can't control, your biology, your physiology, like those things don't matter that much. Um, and something I'd mentioned before, wabi sabi, is this Japanese concept of appreciation of imperfection, right? Like if you or a thing is somehow imperfect, I guess, asymmetrical or whatever, um, there's a certain level of appreciation. It's beautiful at that point because it isn't what we consider to be perfect. Um, and I think that's a good lesson for people, that whatever thing you're trying to achieve, these kind of ideals people want to attain, like, oh, I want to be beautiful or famous or something. Yeah, that doesn't mean shit. Do something great in your life, like leave a legacy. That's my thing. I don't care about okay, well, we're going down a total rabbit hole, but I don't care about having like a headstone or anything like that, being famous. I just want to have left, like, made a difference in life. Um, and I think about people like Elon Musk, right? Well, of course, he's going to be remembered for being him, but he's actually made a difference. Um, Space travel and electric cars and all kinds of shit. That's freaking amazing. That is what everybody should be striving to do. Not being like an Instagram superstar or something like that, because that's hollow and it means nothing and it'll fade away instantaneously. It's going to vanish. Um, and eventually you're going to get old, and then you're not going to be an Instagram star anymore. And Tesla, yeah, you brought up Nikola Tesla earlier. That guy, he made the modern world. Like in his time, he was okay. He was kind of a bit of a celebrity, and girls, all the girls wanted him. But he was kind of a loner, and sort of just wanted to work on his projects and stuff like that. But he created everything we take for granted today. So chew on that, you know.
You got all that from Wabi Sabi? Which Frankly, I always thought it was that spicy green stuff you get with sushi.
That's wasabi. I guess it's like if you squished them together, I suppose. Yeah. I don't know. I just kind of go off on these tangents, but you know, I yeah. Okay, I'm done. That's enough.
I mean, would you change anything genetically if you could?
Mm, maybe I don't know because here's the thing. Like I feel like if you were everything was fine, right? You're perfect, right? That um there wouldn't be a struggle, there wouldn't be a challenge, something to overcome. And then there would be no meaning to life. It's these challenges like having a disability or something that isn't quite working right. Those are the things that make people rise to the occasion and do things, you know, think outside the box and that kind of thing. Do things that nobody would normally do. Maybe even take crazy risks and stuff like that, which
Well,
could
not all
yield.
challenges, though. Not all challenges come from biology, though.
No, but some do.
Yeah.
So I mean that's the thing. Like if you didn't have anything to overcome, you might be too complacent, and that could be a detriment to you because you might not want to do more. Um, maybe I possibly I guess.
I mean, yeah, like there's something to be said for the character building of having stuff to overcome within your own body.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I mean, you went through cancer twice, and I mean, do you think that you'd be as evolved and where you are today if you didn't go through that?
I'm way different. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd definitely be different.
Mm.
That really changed me. That was like a very pivotal time.
Well, if you didn't have to go through that, you might still be working at E.R. Rogers or something. Well, even though they're gone now.
Yeah.
But the thing is, now you're in a completely different field because you went through that, and then you decided to go start a business, knowing you had cancer. You know that. I mean, that's
Yeah, it's the Ace Rimmer thing. It's like he comes across an alternate universe version of himself. It's such a badass, and he's like, oh, he must have got all the breaks in life and the easy stuff, and no, he got held back a grade and he got picked on, and that's what made him, you know. And
yeah. No, that's a really good point. Actually, that's a very good message. That those kinds of shortcomings, you know, the adversity you have to deal with, are things that make you better and teach you lessons and things like that. Stuff you'd never know if life was totally good.
who knew Red Dwarf was so deep?
God, I know, man.
I don't think we've ever referenced this many Red Dwarf episodes in one episode.
Yeah. It's a good series. Yeah. Oh man.
How people are going to think it's this philosophical show or whatever it is.
Well, it kind of is. I mean, we do go a little bit back and forth on and all around in circles and stuff.
Yeah.
I like just kind of like because we're kind of coming up on maybe an hour or so. It okay, so let's say there was a genetic modification machine or a cloning machine, right? Whether it's cloning and putting your brain in somebody, or you could like genetically modify yourself to live forever. Would you, and what do you think would be the potential, I don't know, pros and cons to that, to everybody being able to just like live forever?
I've struggled with this idea a few times. Um, I don't know that our minds could live that long. I don't know that they would be equipped to handle that much experience. And I mean that's just a guess, right? Because like we don't know anyone that's lived 1,000 years.
Yeah.
That we
Well,
know.
there's the whole like contesting the whole Methuselah thing. Like he actually didn't actually live that long, maybe 100+ years, but that's about it.
Right. Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Um, yeah. I mean, even if we found a biological way to be at least near immortal or whatever, I think there would be a point that we cross um, where maybe we just find the limits of the mind, you know?
Yeah, well, that's going into like Zardo's territory. Like,
Oh,
if you
what?
could live forever, would you get bored with being alive and want to die as a form of release at
Yeah,
some point?
I thought,
Maybe you would just go insane, right? Like the program in our mind isn't equipped to handle that kind of longevity.
but hey,
So,
maybe that's the better way to live,
yeah.
right? Like take drop all your ethics and morality from the idea of suicide and the idea of cloning yourself to be immortal or whatever. What if you just got to pick how long you lived, you know?
Hmm.
Like if you decided, hey, I lived 20 years and I think I'm done now, people would be like, okay, well, that person got their experience or whatever. That's cool. But you could
Dang.
choose to live 2,000 years if you wanted to, and be like, you know what? I want to learn like everything there is to learn until they can't learn anymore. Because that's honestly what I would do if I were immortal. I would just be a student, like
Yeah, so would I. Yeah. I'd be
constantly.
more of an experimenter, but yeah, I totally along the same line.
Yeah. But I mean,
Oh,
like,
man.
what if you could just pick when you're like, you know what? I think I've ticked off all the boxes. I think I've done everything I want to do. Um, and what would be the harm in that? Because I mean, if you get to live forever, yeah,
Well, yeah, if you could live forever, then
barring accidents, but like,
yeah, at some point you have to die and you have to end it. I mean, today it's kind of more or less random-ish. Um, but that's a good point. If you were basically immortal, you'd probably get to a point where you're like, you know what? I just want to go on to the next life, I guess,
yeah,
if there is one. I personally, I believe in the idea of reincarnation. I think that makes a lot of sense. And if that were the case, then dying would be a way to kind of push the reset button
right.
and bring yourself back and try again or go down a different path and things like that, which
Actually,
is actually a pretty cool idea.
that reminds me of a really good talking point that we should cover on this, and that's beyond just the ethics of cloning. What do you think? Because like, if it were like a way where you could be practically immortal, let's say,
Hmm.
clone yourself into a new body or something and just effectively live forever or whatever. At some point, there would have to be an ethical decision of how many is too many on the planet Earth. Say we get up to like 20 billion people or something,
Yeah.
and like 17 billion of them are clones or whatever, and have
Well,
lived practically forever, and people keep being born as well, and it just
I
fills
mean,
up.
I think there's enough resources and space to support a pretty good amount of people. But if you had people who lived for, say, 800 years or more or something, they'd get really good at engineering and spacecraft building and stuff. And we'd eventually just like spread out to the solar system and the galaxy and explore other worlds and stuff. So I think it would sort itself out, or maybe we'd just go nuts and have a bunch of wars and nuke each other to death. Who knows? I
Well,
think it'll just reset automatically.
all right. Well, here's another ethical quandary. Let's say you're going out for a job. You're a plucky 25-year-old, and you're sitting in a little group interview, and they're going around being like, how much experience have you got? And you're like, well, I did a year after college at the law firm, and then the next guy over is like, how much experience have you got? Well, for 672 years now, I've been, like, yeah, it'd be hard to get a job because of all those goddamn clones.
That's true. I mean, my own personal view is start a business, Um, No, that's a really good point. That would be an issue.
Not everyone can start a business because then everyone would be working while the businesses are open and they can't go be patrons of the business. Because they'd all have their businesses to run.
Well, that doesn't quite work that way, but it goes. Oh man.
Circular reasoning.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man. Well, I had a book recommendation. If I remember it, I'll put it down somewhere down there. A really good book, which I can't remember now. Something about the end of the universe.
But don't take my word for it.
Dun-dun-dun. Oh man, Reading Rainbow. Oh, I love that show. God.
Oh yeah.
Well, man, we covered so many things. Holy shit, this is like a pretty good conversation.
Just a couple days ago, Eddie Van Halen died.
Yeah, man, I heard that. That sucks.
Could we, before he's like gone, should we try to clone Eddie Van Halen?
Oh man. Well, but here's the thing.
Van Halen.
He'll only be the same biological person. He won't have the same experiences or anything like that led him to be one of the greatest guitar players in history of the world. So he could end up being Hitler. I don't know. So we might want to be careful.
Eddie Hitler.
Oh man,
that's the context.
Oh, how history would be different. Wow. Yeah. Well, that's the whole thing. Like, be careful what you meddle in. Like, don't tug on that. You never know what it might be attached to.
That's what she said.
Well, I was quoting Buckaroo Banzai, but that's good enough. Oh man, yeah, this is a good one.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Well, did you have any other ideas about cloning that you wanted to throw out there?
Well, I'm sure there's some things, but I think we've covered enough.
Yeah.
And we've opened a few doors to like new episodes and maybe things we could throw into, I don't know, a lightning round or minute microscopy here and there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea it was gonna go this far. That was fun.
You haven't learned by now?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. We could basically take any random topic and turn it into like an hour-long episode that like spans the whole of the existence of the universe and talks about every possible topic, and we come back and wrap it around neatly and tidily back into where we started from. I don't know that we did that this time, but close enough.
We got pretty far out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is actually like a really good one.
Yeah. I'd love to hear stories, maybe not even stories, I guess, but like I'd love to hear people's thoughts on like what they would they clone someone? Would they like to live forever in new husks every so often or whatever?
Yeah, or if you could like genetically modify yourself, like what changes would you make? Or, going back to what we talked about earlier, if you could go back in time and give yourself advice when you were younger, and stupider. What advice would you give? Or just, I don't know, talk about the ethics of cloning and anything we talked about. Actually, there's kind of a lot of angles to go down.
Yeah.
But yeah. Oh man. Wow.
Throw some commentary in the comment section, and don't forget to hang out for the song at the end, and check it out on Spotify and iTunes or Amazon Music or Google Music.
You're supposed to say that at the beginning. That's okay. Yeah, and thanks for deep sync diving with us into cloning and genetic modification and life extension and life, the universe, and everything, and the number 42, that kind of thing. Yeah. Oh man, have a good night, everybody.
To look above and gaze at nothing, from the empty sockets of my eyes, maybe something of the infrared spectrum, to be a constant thing that never dies. I can't forget my monkey's machine, certain corruption comes from all that I see. All I want is to be right step. The ancient quest to battle oneself, some country veterans to ride a race, seeing everything in brand new ways, verbatim images of memory.